Welcome to tonight's story. Close your eyes and imagine a snowy kingdom where silence blankets the land and a haunting melody drifts through the mountains. Follow Prince Eric on a journey into the heart of winter's curse, where courage and sacrifice reveal secrets as old as the snow. Let the gentle rhythm of the tale carry you into a peaceful slumber, where dreams are as vast and quiet as the frozen peaks. Breathe deeply, relax, and let the story guide you into the night. The air was heavy with silence, a kind that seemed to have been lingering for centuries, coating every snow-covered stone and brittle branch. Prince Eirik adjusted his cloak against the biting cold, his breath forming clouds that hung in the air before vanishing into the night. The village below was still, every home shuttered tight against the dangers rumored to dwell in the snowy mountains. But despite their precautions, the people could not escape the melody that drifted down the slopes each evening. Eric's horse neighed softly, its eyes reflecting the apprehension in his own heart. This song was not like any he'd heard before. It was not gentle or joyful, but filled with a haunting sorrow that dug into the bones and left a chill far deeper than the winter itself. He had heard of villagers venturing close to the mountains, compelled by the melody, only to be discovered days later, lying in the snow, their eyelids frozen shut in an unbreakable slumber. The strangest part was the frost that clung to them. Not the soft crystals of snow, but a deeper, older ice that resisted the warmth of even the fiercest fires. The curse, they called it. A winter curse that had plagued the mountains since time immemorial, cast by a ghostly singer whose voice wove sorrow into the very air. Only those willing to face the song and unravel its origins could hope to break his hold on the land. And so Prince Eirik had set out, his heart caught between duty and a curiosity he couldn't explain. Night had fully descended when the melody began. It started as a faint hum, barely audible over the wind, but grew steadily, unfolding like mist over the snow. Eirik reined in his horse, his gloved hand resting on its mane as he listened. The sound was ethereal, more felt than heard, and it seemed to swirl around him, guiding his gaze toward the highest peak. He pressed onward, each step taking him deeper into the mountain's shadowed embrace. The path twisted through narrow crevices and winding passes, where the snow rose in towering walls on either side. Shadows played tricks before his eyes, the dark forms shifting with the song as if responding to its call. Eirik was no stranger to night journeys, but here, in the heart of the mountain's sorrow, he felt like a trespasser in a place meant for no living soul. An hour passed, maybe two, and the melody only grew stronger, resonating with a haunting beauty that seemed to pull him forward. As he walked, he saw glimpses of movement, a shimmer on the snow, an outline among the trees. Yet when he turned to look, Nothing remained but silence and snow. Then from the corner of his eye, he spotted the first of the mountain's guardians. Standing upon a ridge, barely discernible against the night sky, was a snow wolf, its coat as white as the drifts surrounding them. Its eyes glinted like ice, wise and cold, as it watched him with a gaze that felt as ancient as the mountain itself. Eric stopped, his heart thudding in his chest as he returned the wolf's gaze. The creature was unafraid, unmoving, as if it too was bound by the melody filling the night. Eric took a step forward, his voice low. "I seek the source of the song." The wolf tilted its head, a slow and deliberate movement before it slipped away into the shadows. Eric remained still for a moment, pondering the strange encounter before he pressed on, the music growing louder still, a mournful lullaby weaving through the darkness. Soon he came upon an ancient tree, its branches bare and blackened, standing alone in the snow like a sentinel. Beneath it lay the faint outline of something human, a figure frozen in place, as if caught mid-step. Eric approached, the song pressing against his senses as he saw the frost-covered face of a villager he recognized. The man's features were locked in an expression of awe, or perhaps terror, a thin layer of ice sealing his eyes shut. With a shiver, Eric backed away, realizing the mountain's true cruelty. Those drawn in by the melody were condemned to remain here, frozen and eternal, their fates woven into the song. He could turn back now, but he knew the curse would continue, claiming more of his people until the mountain had its fill. So he pressed onward into the deeper shadows, where the song seemed to pulse with a life of its own, carrying him toward a fate as uncertain as the night around him. The melody rose, guiding him toward the hidden heart of the mountain, where he would face the source of this unending winter. The mountain loomed silent and watchful, its peaks lost in swirling clouds that drifted like pale phantoms through the night. Prince Eric felt its presence more deeply with each step, as if the mountain itself were a sentient thing measuring his resolve. The ancient song was his only guide, carrying him ever upward into the heart of winter's curse. The path was treacherous, winding along cliffsides slick with frost and weaving through dense woods where the snow lay in thick, undisturbed blankets. Eric's breath grew shallow, each exhalation a faint cloud dissolving into the frigid air. The melody pressed on, but now there was something else in the silence. A soft, whispered rhythm that seemed to blend with the song. A sound like footsteps just out of sight. He turned quickly, his eyes scanning the shadows, but found nothing. The silence settled again, vast and unbroken. It felt like the calm before an approaching storm. And as he pressed onward, Eric found his mind returning to the legends he had heard of this place. They spoke of creatures older than the mountains, spirits bound to the snow and ice. watching over the cursed land. Now, here in the depths of their frozen domain, he could feel their gaze upon him, a weight pressing against his chest. In time, he came to a narrow pass, flanked by ancient pines bent under the weight of their frosted branches. There, in the center of the path, stood a figure that froze him in his tracks. A white stag, its antlers like twisted branches dusted with frost, its eyes deep and knowing as it watched him approach. Eric held his breath, feeling a strange reverence well within him. The stag did not flee, but stood as if waiting, its breath misting in the cold air. Eric took a step forward, bowing his head in respect. The stag dipped its head in return, acknowledging his presence with a slow blink. Then, with a single fluid motion, it turned and began to walk, leading him deeper into the mountain's heart. Following the stag, Eric felt a quiet sense of purpose, as though he had become part of something much older than himself, drawn into a world of secrets hidden beneath the snow. The song grew louder, each note vibrating through his chest as he moved through the trees, watching the stag's sure steps on the narrow path. As they walked, he began to notice faint shapes among the trees, figures that flickered at the edge of his vision, like shadows made of mist. He stopped, his heart hammering, as he caught sight of a slender form, draped in tattered robes, watching him from the shadows. Her face was pale as the snow, her hair flowing like silver threads, her eyes hollow and sorrowful. She held a hand to her chest, clutching something unseen, as if she, too, bore a burden as heavy as winter itself. The figure vanished into the darkness, leaving only the whisper of the song in her wake. Eric felt a chill that was more than the mountain's cold, a haunting emptiness that clung to him as he pressed onward. The stag halted at the edge of a frozen glade, its vast surface glittering under a thin veil of moonlight. Here, the song resonated with an otherworldly clarity, its notes weaving through the trees, carrying a sorrow so deep it seemed to settle into his very bones. Eric glanced at the stag, but it had gone, leaving him alone in the heart of winter's shadow. He stepped into the glade, the snow crunching beneath his boots, and the song grew louder, wrapping around him like a spell. The air was thick with an ancient sorrow, a pain so raw it felt alive. He sensed, without fully understanding, that this place was sacred, bound by something deeper than time. The snow seemed to hold its breath, the trees standing as silent witnesses to his journey. Then out of the silence, a voice whispered, low and mournful, "Why do you come here, child of summer?" Eric spun, but saw no one. The voice lingered in the air, a cold echo woven into the song itself. "To break the curse," he replied, his voice carrying a note of defiance, though his heart trembled. A faint laugh echoed through the glade, soft as falling snow. "The curse is older than you, Prince, older than the mountain itself." I don't care, Eric replied, clenching his fists. I will find its source, and I will end it. The silence returned, heavier than before, and the air seemed to darken around him. The mountain watched, testing his resolve, weighing the worth of his words. And as he stood there, alone in the shadowed glade, he felt the presence of the spirits drawing close, bound to the song that haunted the night. They lingered at the edge of his vision, their ghostly forms weaving in and out of the trees, waiting, watching. Eric knew then that the journey was only beginning. This was no simple quest, but a descent into the mountain's very soul, where secrets lay buried beneath centuries of snow. And so, with the song as his guide, and a determination that burned brighter than fear, he stepped deeper into the unknown, toward the source of the curse and the ancient sorrow that bound it to the land. The mountain's heart lay before him, silent and vast, a place suspended in the icy grip of an endless winter. Prince Eirik had journeyed far beyond the borders of any familiar land into a valley hidden away, like a secret whispered by the winds. Here the song was more than sound. It was a pulse in the air, a presence that seeped into his bones. Each note lingered with the weight of 1,000 memories, filled with longing and despair. Eric had never felt so close to the edge of something unfathomable. At the valley's center, encased in a thick, translucent sheet of ice, was a lake, smooth and unbroken, as if untouched by time. Pale moonlight spilled across its surface, casting an ethereal glow that danced over the frozen ripples. As Eirik stepped closer, the song shifted, growing softer, like a lullaby meant for some lost soul. And then he saw her. Emerging from the mist that clung to the lake's edge was a woman draped in silver, her gown flowing, like water shimmering with an otherworldly light. She moved with an elegance beyond mortal grace, her face pale and sorrowful, her eyes reflecting the depth of the lake's icy expanse. Her hair drifted like a silken veil over her shoulders, and as she gazed upon him, her expression held a mixture of sadness and something else, a quiet, unspoken recognition. Eirik felt his heart tighten, the air growing colder as he met her gaze. She was beautiful in a way that defied the natural world, a being carved from the mountain's very soul. The haunting song faded, leaving a silence heavy with anticipation. "Prince of the mortal realm," she spoke, her voice soft and layered with centuries of sorrow. "Why have you come to this cursed place?" Eirik took a step forward, his voice steady but edged with wonder. "To end the curse that haunts these mountains. I seek to free my people from this endless winter." The spirit looked down, as if the weight of his words settled upon her, and she let out a long shuddering sigh. "The curse is woven into the very fabric of this land. It is no simple thing to undo, for it is bound by sorrow and sacrifice. Her voice was filled with an aching melancholy, a sorrow that resonated with the cold around them. Eric felt compelled to understand. "Tell me, how did this curse come to be?" The spirit raised her gaze to the sky, where stars shone dimly through the veil of mist, and for a moment her face softened as if caught in a memory. "Long ago, I was not as you see me now. I was once a princess of these lands, mortal as you are. This lake was the heart of our kingdom, a place of joy and warmth, where we celebrated beneath the sun's golden light." Her words painted a vision in his mind, of summer days filled with laughter, of people gathering on the shores of the lake, their faces alight with happiness. But as she continued, her tone darkened, heavy with unspoken grief. "There was a promise made," she whispered, her eyes hollow with sorrow. "A promise that bound my soul to this lake, to sing for eternity, to keep watch over the sorrow that claimed my life. I became a prisoner of my own song, bound to relive my loss in every note, in every breath that leaves my lips." Eric felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold as he listened to her words, sensing the depth of her sacrifice. She was more than a ghost. She was the embodiment of a broken vow, a spirit condemned to mourn for eternity, her sorrow woven into the song that haunted the mountains. "What can be done?" he asked softly, almost afraid of the answer. The spirit's gaze turned to him, her expression inscrutable. "The curse can only be lifted by one who shares my sorrow, who is willing to bear the weight of my grief. It is a sacrifice few would willingly make, for it requires a piece of one's soul, a part that can never be reclaimed." Eric's chest tightened, a deep empathy stirring within him. The weight of her sorrow was almost tangible, as if he could reach out and touch the threads of despair binding her to this place. Her loneliness was a vast, hollow thing, and he knew that ending the curse would come at a cost. "Tell me what I must do," he said, his voice steady but filled with an aching resolve. The spirit's eyes softened, and for a fleeting moment, a faint smile played upon her lips. "If you are truly willing to bear my sorrow, then come to the lake at midnight's peak. Stand at its heart, where the ice is thinnest, and let the song consume you. Only by embracing the depths of my sorrow can you break the curse." As she spoke, she began to fade, her form dissolving into mist, leaving Arik alone by the lake. The haunting melody rose once more, echoing across the valley with renewed sorrow. But now it was different. There was a strange comfort in the song, as if it no longer mourned only for itself, but for the burden they would now share. Eric stared at the lake, the surface smooth as glass, reflecting the stars above. He knew the choice he would make, and as he prepared himself for the midnight hour, he felt a solemn peace settle within him. The weight of the curse, of her sorrow, would soon be his to bear, a sacrifice to end the winter's reign. The night deepened, and the valley lay still, as if holding its breath. Prince Eirik stood by the frozen lake, gazing out at the stars mirrored in its glassy surface. Midnight was near, and the air was so cold it felt sharp against his skin, each breath a struggle as he prepared for the task ahead. The spirit's words lingered in his mind, her sorrow woven into every haunting note that filled the silence. To break the curse, he would have to bear her sorrow as his own, to give a part of himself that he could never reclaim. The lake's center lay beneath a faint spectral glow, the ice shimmering as if touched by starlight. Eirik took a deep breath, steadying himself, and stepped onto the frozen expanse. Each step carried him closer to the lake's heart, where the ice thinned to reveal shadows of the depths below. His reflection moved beside him, pale and wavering in the thin layer of frost. He could see in his own eyes the fear he fought to ignore, and the resolve that had carried him this far. As he reached the lake's center, the song grew louder, its sorrowful melody winding around him, filling the air like an incantation. The notes pressed against his chest, heavy and insistent, sinking into his very bones. And then, in a voice that was both far away and achingly near, he heard the spirit speak. "Are you willing, Prince, to carry my sorrow, to share my burden and release my soul?" Her words echoed in the night, soft yet filled with a weight that made him tremble. Eirik closed his eyes, feeling the immensity of what he was about to accept. The song whispered of love lost, of betrayals buried in snow, of an eternity spent longing for something just out of reach. He felt her loneliness settle into his own heart, her memories intertwining with his own, as if he too had once been bound to this place. "I am willing," he whispered, his voice breaking in the stillness. "Let my soul bear your sorrow, so that you may find peace." At his words, a chill unlike any he had ever known seeped into him, piercing his heart and filling his mind with memories that were not his own. Visions rose before him of a summer day, a young woman standing beside the lake, laughter spilling from her lips as she looked upon a face he could not see. Then darkness fell, and he saw her betrayed, abandoned, her heart breaking as the first snows fell. The sorrow was boundless, an endless winter of grief that stretched across centuries, freezing her spirit in its cold embrace. Eirik gasped as the memories flooded him, each one searing itself into his heart. He felt as if his very soul was being reshaped, the contours of his being stretched to contain the sorrow that was now his own. The chill deepened, and he fell to his knees, his breath a thin mist against the ice. The song filled his mind, weaving through his thoughts, entwining with his memories until he could no longer tell where his sorrow ended and hers began. Time slipped away, and he was no longer aware of the frozen lake beneath him, of the stars shining above. There was only the sorrow, vast and consuming, binding him to the spirit's story, her pain becoming his own. In that moment, he understood the true price of freedom, not just for her, but for himself. He would forever carry this part of her within him, a shadow of winter etched into his heart. Gradually, the song softened, its mournful notes fading into silence. Eric opened his eyes, feeling a strange emptiness settle over him. The air was warmer, the ice beneath him beginning to melt, and he could feel the spirit's presence lifting, her sorrow easing, as if she, too, had been released from her burden. She appeared before him one last time, her form shimmering in the faint light. Her eyes, once hollow with grief, now held a quiet peace. She knelt beside him, her hand hovering just above his heart, and for a moment he felt her gratitude, a warmth that chased away the last of the winter's chill. "Thank you, brave prince," she whispered, her voice like the gentlest breeze, "for your sacrifice, for your kindness. I am free, and so too shall be the mountains. Winter will come no more to this place." With those words, her form dissolved into mist, a final sigh that lingered in the air before fading into the stars. Eric watched her disappear, the last echoes of the song fading into silence, leaving only the stillness of the night. He stood slowly, feeling the weight of her sorrow settle into a quiet corner of his heart. It was a part of him now, a memory woven into his soul, a reminder of the sacrifice he had made. The snow around him was melting, revealing patches of dark earth beneath, and a warm breeze drifted through the valley, carrying with it the promise of spring. As he made his way back down the mountain, he knew he would never be the same. He had become a part of the mountain's story, and it a part of his. Though he would carry her sorrow with him always, he felt a strange peace, as if he, too, had been freed from something he hadn't known he carried. The curse had ended, and the winter was gone. But the song would remain, not in the mountains, but within him, a memory of a love lost and a spirit freed, echoing in the quiet corners of his heart. Prince Eirik descended from the mountains in the early light of dawn. The snow, once thick and unyielding, was softening underfoot, leaving trails of water that glistened like liquid silver in the gentle sun. The air had lost its chill. The frost clinging to the trees was melting, and the silence of winter was broken by the faint rustling of awakening life. Every step took him closer to his kingdom, yet with each step he felt further from the man he had been before. The burden of sorrow he had taken from the spirit weighed heavily on his heart. But it was not a grief that consumed. It was a sadness that lay quietly within him, a shadow he had agreed to carry. Her song lingered there, a faint melody he would hear in moments of silence, a reminder of the story he now bore. The mountain's curse had lifted, yet in some ways it had left its mark on him. binding him to the memory of the spirit and her sorrow. As he made his way through the forest at the mountain's edge, he began to notice signs of life where there had been only snow and silence. Birds flitted from branch to branch, shaking off the last remnants of frost, their songs light and tentative, as if testing the air. The forest floor, once blanketed in ice, revealed hints of green as tiny shoots pushed through the damp earth. The winter's grip was truly broken, and the land itself seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. When Eric reached the village at the foot of the mountains, he saw people standing in awe, marveling at the sight of the snow melting, the warmth spreading across their land. Some fell to their knees, whispering prayers of gratitude, while others embraced, laughing with joy as they felt the sun's warmth on their skin for the first time in many moons. The villagers spotted Eric, and their expressions shifted from wonder to reverence. They gathered around him, some reaching out to touch his cloak, others murmuring his name in gratitude. He accepted their thanks with quiet humility, his mind still wrapped in the spirit's sorrow, her song echoing faintly within him. He was the hero, yet he felt like a ghost, a man who had touched something beyond life and returned forever changed. One of the elders approached him, his weathered face softened by a gentle smile. "You have freed us from the winter's curse," he said, his voice rich with emotion. "The mountains will sing of your bravery for generations." Eric nodded, but he didn't speak. Words felt hollow, inadequate to describe what he had seen and felt. Instead, he looked toward the mountains, now shedding their icy cloak under the sun's embrace. The peaks rose majestic and free, no longer bound by the sorrowful song that had haunted them for centuries. Days passed, and with them, the final remnants of winter melted away. Spring blossomed, the rivers ran swift and clear, and the people of Eric's kingdom rejoiced. Yet the prince remained quiet, carrying within him the memory of the spirit, of her sorrow, and the love she had lost. The song was his now, a melody woven into the fabric of his heart, a part of him as real as the land he had freed. One evening, as he walked alone by a river newly freed from ice, he paused, listening to the water as it rushed over the rocks. The sound was soothing, familiar, and he closed his eyes, letting the gentle murmur of the river blend with the memory of the spirit's song. He knew that her sorrow would always live within him, a gentle ache that would never fade, yet he felt peace in that knowledge. He had become her witness, her story keeper, a guardian of a memory that had once bound a soul to winter's endless night. The kingdom celebrated his return, honored him as their hero, and sang songs of his bravery. Yet Eric carried no pride, only a quiet humility. He had touched something sacred, had felt the weight of a sorrow that transcended time, and he had offered a part of himself to free a soul from its prison. He was not only their prince, but a keeper of winter's tale, a memory he would hold until his final days. As the years passed, Eric ruled his people with wisdom and compassion, his heart ever attuned to the quiet sorrows and joys of those he served. And when the first snow would fall each winter, he would stand alone in the forest, letting the cold air surround him, listening for the faintest echo of her song. It was a song no one else could hear, a melody woven into his soul, a memory of a love and a sorrow that had shaped his destiny. The mountains stood free, the land bloomed anew, and in the heart of the forest, the prince would listen to the silence, a guardian of a story only he could tell. And though the winter curse was lifted, its memory lived on, etched in the quiet strength of a prince who had journeyed into the shadows and returned with a song of sorrow and a heart touched by the eternal.